What's good, y'all? Anthony Cordova here, and in today's video I wanted to talk about the top 3 things you need to restore your own classic car. In my 3 decades of experience, number 1 is going to be a solid plan and a solid budget. Oftentimes, and I've seen it 100 times, is somebody will get into doing or restoring a classic car, whether they're doing some of the work themselves or doing all the work themselves or paying people to do the work. They get into a build of their own, and they oftentimes don't plan ahead or don't have a budget in mind, or just start taking the car somewhere or doing work on the car about halfway or maybe 3/4 of the way or maybe 1/4 of the way into the job. They end up losing interest and figuring out that this stuff costs a lot of money. And unless you just have endless amounts of money, you have to plan ahead and budget. Planning things like, are you going to strip the car down, or are you just going to paint it, or are you going to re-chrome everything, or are you going to have it pinstriped or graphicked, or what kind of suspension are you going to run, what kind of motor are you going to run, are you going to attempt to paint it yourself, or are you going to pay somebody to paint it? If you strip it down, are you going to take it to a media blast company or have it maybe chemically stripped, or are you going to strip it by yourself? I mean, there's tons of variables. And if you call some of these classic car parts suppliers, for the most part, they have big catalogs and you can order out of. Call your manufacturer's classic parts distributor and you can get a catalog mailed to you, or there'll be an online catalog they can send you, or you can just order with somebody over the phone. When you start doing this like enough, you start to know the community and you start to talk to salespeople in these companies, because most of the time they're not huge companies that are dealing with these classic car parts. So you can get on the phone and identify which parts you need. A lot of times they're very informative at the parts companies or the parts distributors. So make sure you have a solid plan. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of money. I made good money for my age group, because at 19, having my first kid, went into the body shop, learned how to prep, learned how to do body work at 19. So while my friends were off learning in trade school, I was already working in the trade. So always had good money, but always had lots of bad habits. So my first car that I customized, luckily, my first car that I built for myself, that I Lowrider customized, because I didn't build that car. That car was already done. It was a clean, nice driver that I bought off some old guy, and it was a 74 Monte Carlo. It was red with a tan vinyl top. I put some wheels on it, I put hydraulics on it, and I put a stereo in it, and I was cruising. I was low riding. But prior to that, one of my friends had some money, her parents had money, so she bought I think it was like a 65 or 64 VW Beetle. So my friend, one of my longtime friends, always makes fun of me because I remember telling him like, oh yeah, this car's clean, no Bondo. So he always, whenever he's like, remember that bug when you first started painting, that you were like, no Bondo. But that thing ended up having like a 1/2 inch of Bondo, like on the roof and the trunk. But we were kids, we were 19. It was my first ever attempt at restoring something. That car never ended up getting done, because once we got into it and realized that this is going to cost a shitload of money because we were kids, that car just ended up sitting, and my friend ended up buying something else that was already done. So preferably find the right car from the gate so that you're not spending a crazy amount of money. If you follow the lowriding community, I know Lone Star Lowe's just did a breakdown of price for his 1960 Impala convertible, and I think just the parts and materials and consumables alone on that car were $130,000 and some change. And he did all the work himself, so he didn't count any labor. He said if he would have had to count labor, he would have had to have added another 130 grand, because newsflash, these cars are expensive if you're doing these types of cars. But if you're where you're replacing crazy amounts of sheet metal and fixing crazy amounts of damage, because these old convertibles, they're hard to find now. They're hard to come by. So the values are going way up. And these old Impalas, the values are going way up. And these old Chevys, the values are going way up. So if you can find a clean, you know, maybe 70s, even 60s, sometimes you can find some clean later model 60s cars, like maybe like a 70 Impala or like a 69 Impala. You know, these 64s, 63s, and all these 62s, the real popular cars, you're gonna be hard pressed to find a nice clean one that somebody doesn't want to keep or want a whole lot of money for. But you can still find some of these 80s, you know. I mean, El Caminos look sick lowrided. Some guys hate them, but I think they look cool. You can get into like a Lincoln Town car if you want like a 90s car, or, you know, there's options out there. But you have to have resources, and you have to have a plan and a budget so that you can get through your first ever customization or restoration or whatever. Your first build. Back in the 90s and in the 80s, they lowrided almost anything. They did Vega lowriders. I've seen Pinto lowriders. I've seen Corvair lowriders. I've seen Jaguar lowriders in the 90s. I've seen Corvette lowriders in the 90s. I've seen Porsche lowriders. I've never seen a Volvo lowrider, but fuck it, do a Volvo lowrider. Who cares? It's your build. It's your idea. Think outside the box. Be different. You don't have to have a $300,000, $200,000 convertible Impala like everybody else, or a 64, or 63, or a G body like everybody else. Get a earlier model Regal or Cutlass, like a 77 or a 75 or 76, or Wildcat, or I don't know. But the point is think outside the box. There's still cool cars that are grandma cars that are different, that can be had out there for less money and are in better condition so that you can lowride. When it comes to these cars, you're better off knowing what you're getting yourself into than just going into it blindly. Even on this car, if you've been watching my footage from the 58 Lowrider build, I sometimes get to a point where I'm like, how do I fix this? I end up being able to problem solve and get my way through it. But if you're a newbie and you got to something like this where it's super difficult and you didn't know how to figure out, then you just be stuck. And if you didn't have any resources or a budget because you ran out of money, then your car's gonna sit and collect rust and dust, and it's never gonna be finished, and you're never gonna realize your dream of riding down the street, bumping your oldies or bumping your funk jams and hitting switches. And you're never gonna realize your dream of building, customizing your first lowrider. Number 2, make sure that you have a space to work on the car. If you're working on the car yourself, a lot of times if you're within city limits, if you have nosy neighbors, because a lot of times you're cutting with cutting wheels and grinders and you're banging on sheet metal for hours at a time, late at night, or whenever you're doing this thing, if you have a regular day job, right? So your neighbors are going to hate you. On top of it, when you go to spray paint, the overspray goes everywhere and it stinks, and your neighbors are going to hate you. So if you don't live in a rural community, or you live in a nice neighborhood, or if you have an HOA, most likely they're not going to like you restoring a classic car in your garage. So number 2, make sure you have a place to work on this car. Maybe you have a friend's house that you can take it to where he lives in a rural community. Maybe you can rent a space for a while if you're just doing a small restoration or a quick paint job and just bolt on parts at your house. But you need a place to work on your car. And number 3, resources. I've had some people leave comments like, I want to build my first lowrider. I don't even know where to start. Go to a lowrider car show, meet some of the community, jump on forums. Lowriders are family people. Although some of them may look intimidating, they're just family people like you and me, and they're just out to have a good time for the most part. So go to a lowrider show, ask questions. If you like a certain car, ask what year, ask what kind, ask what model. The more you get out there and network, the better off you are. There used to be Lay It Low out there. I don't know if there's any other forums right now for low riding, but somebody should start a forum. Maybe I'll do it, who knows. But on a side note, that was on a side note actually, but get out there and network. Go to some car shows. If you want to get into a certain culture, whether it be, you know, tuners, hot rods, lowriders, rat rods, or customs, and get out there and network. Lowriding isn't going anywhere. It's here to stay. We're still going to be cruising. We're still going to be driving down the boulevard, hitting switches. It's not a fad. It's not a trend. It's here to stay. So if you start now and you do your homework and you come up with a budget and you come up with a plan and you have a location and you can be resourceful and network and you can get an online catalog or order a paper catalog or talk on the phone, you can do this. You can build or customize your own lowrider. Everybody has to start somewhere. We don't just start on $200,000 convertible Impalas. With that being said, I'm going to end the video. I want to do something different this week because I've been doing the updates on the 58 and I'm still doing the updates on the 58, but I'm taking a little break. Please consider subscribing, hitting that like, leaving a comment if you feel called to, or hit that notification bell so you can be notified whenever I drop these videos. All right, I'm out. Peace.